the things that I have been trying to bring to our thinking is that when we look at a particular passage, we should be asking ourselves where we hear echoes of that passage in other places. We should always be asking the question, where have we heard this before? With that in mind, we did a paper handout last week, I'm doing one this week. This particular one was a paper I attended in 1992 at the Society of Biblical Literature, and it's dealing with the narrative account that we have in Numbers, where Moses sends out the 12 spies, and the narrative that we have in Joshua, where Joshua sends out 2 spies, because we have a spy narrative, and so it puts them together. I'm not going to hand these out. If you want one, come see me, but it's a paper that you can take and read, and it compares the 2 narratives because they share a lot of items that are very much the same. And so I believe that we're supposed to read them together and see them as a unit and to think of them in terms of each other. So I'll leave those up here. If you'd like to have one of those, just see me afterwards. All right. Please go to Genesis chapter 37. I want to make some comments, running commentary on this particular text, 37 and 38. I'll just remind you of this. The comparison between our apostolic reading and our our Torah reading is we have 2 Josephs and we have dreams. Okay, so it's interesting that in the book of Genesis we have the highest concentration of dreams in any book of the Hebrew Scripture. Dreams are going to be what pushes things forward and gives us insight into what's happening with the rest of the text. So go with me to Genesis chapter 37. And I want to make comments, we'll just do some running commentary, and then you have the notes too as well for later on if you'd like to read those, but I want to make some initial comments here. It says, Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brothers, and the lad was with the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, which are the 2 handmaids, his father's wives, and Joseph brought a bad report for them to his father. Now, where else in Hebrew Scripture do we have the bringing of a bad report? Same word used.
Oh.
Spies, thank you, I just mentioned it. Yes. So the spies bring back an evil report or a bad report. Same word used here. Anytime somebody brings back a bad report, you can almost be assured that something negative is going to happen to them. Okay? Whoever brings back a bad report, it's just a tip-off to say, most likely something's going to happen, something bad's going to happen to this person. Now, Israel, verse 3, loved Joseph more than all his children, because he was the son of his old age. So he made him a tunic of colors. But when his brothers saw that his father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peaceably to him. You ever had families like that?
No.
People become estranged because of different things, favoritism. And in this case, the father wants to make sure that the favoritism is not subtle.
It's like very prominent.
Very prominent when you say, look, tell you what, I want you to come here and give you this really nice colored coat. You guys are good nothing. So the favoritism is quite pronounced here. And I think that Israel is trying to say to his other sons, this is going to be the one that leads the family. That's kind of the subtle thing that's going on here. And then verse 5 says, now Joseph had a dream, and he told it to his brothers. You got to wonder if Joseph was not a little cocky here, because it'd be like saying, hey, guys, I want you to know something. God spoke to me, and he says, I'm going to rule over you guys. Just want you to know that. And we notice that dreams are coming in pairs. Dreams come in pairs because the text tells us that it means that it's certain, it's definite to happen, it will happen soon. So he has 2 dreams. Okay? And the first dream is, he has this, the sheep bow down in the field to his sheep. And then the sun, moon, and the stars, and I'll talk
So with the fact that the culture at that time was the firstborn has all of the, et cetera,
Which would be
and yet in this family, that has not been the case.
Correct.
And so
The firstborn is not. He was saying that the culture says that the firstborn is to have the double portion and to be the one who leads the family after the death of the patriarch. But all the way through the book of Genesis, that's not going to happen. The one thing you can almost be assured of is that whoever the firstborn is, they're not going to be the one to push the messianic agenda forward.
And so there has to be those two things in each of these sons' heads, like, well, this is the way things are supposed to be, but wait, this is not how it's been.
Right. Just because the culture says that this is what should happen doesn't mean that that's what's going to happen.
I was just gonna say though, but he was the firstborn of Rachel, who was.
Right.
He's the firstborn of Rachel, but he's not the firstborn
Right, but maybe.
of the father. Yeah, so because we have Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah. Judah's the fourth one in. By the way, as you start to read chapter 37, you might think that Joseph is going to be the one who leads the family. That's why chapter 38 is there to say, no, it's not going to be Joseph. It's going to be Judah. We'll talk about him in just a moment. But Joseph brings this negative report. Then he says, had these two dreams. I've argued that one dream is a hint that there is going to be resurrection because he says the sun and the moon and the stars will bow down. But his mom, who is the star in the narrative, never bows down to him because she dies.
but she's the moon.
The moon, she's the moon. So the father is the sun, the mother is the moon, 11 stars. The 11 stars do come and bow down to Joseph. His father actually comes and bows down to him. His mother never does. So it's one of those little hints in the Hebrew text that there's going to be resurrection in order for this to be fulfilled. Okay, and the narratives do this. They give us these little hints that things are moving in a different direction. Okay. Now look what happens. They were binding sheaves in the field, and behold, my sheep arose and stood upright, and your sheep stood all around and bowed down to my sheep. And his brothers said to him, shall you indeed reign over us, or shall you indeed have dominion over us? So they hated him even more for his dreams and for all his words. Then he dreamed still another dream. He told to his brothers, you'd think he would figure this out. But after the first dream, the brothers are like really not happy, and they're not going to talk to you. And you kind of believe that Joseph is either arrogant or naive, or arrogantly naive.
Probably a combination.
Probably a little bit combination, because you'd think that he would say, the last time I told them one of my dreams, they weren't really overly happy about it. Didn't seem to resonate with them.
So I'll reinforce
So I'll reinforce it with another dream. Hey, you guys aren't going to believe this. I had another dream. The brothers are like, well, we can't wait to hear this one.
Well, I mean, how old was he versus?
17.
17.
Okay.
Yeah,
He's 17.
17.
Oh, so he's old enough to know that he's making them angry.
Hey, maybe he's sticking. Who knows?
But he's also a teenager.
He's either sticking them or he's not. Look what he says. He says, I have dreamed another dream. And this time the sun, the moon, and the 11 stars bowed down to me. Now, not the first dream said that the brothers were going to bow down. This one goes and up to Andy. Mom and Dad are going to also bow down. And the brothers. So this one actually ups this a little bit more. And now his father gets a little miffed. Because he told to his father, see, his father was like, okay, if your brothers bow down to you, I can probably live with that. But then he says, so he told to his father and his brothers, and his father rebuked him. And said to him, what is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall your mother and I and your brothers indeed come to bow down to the earth before you? And his brothers envied him, but it said this, but his father kept the matter.
And we hear that again.
And we've heard that again, we get that in Luke, where it says Mary pondered these things. So his father is thinking to himself, okay, this kid's having dreams, and there's some portent of the future with these dreams. So then it says this, verse 12, his brothers went to feed their father's flock in Shechem. And Israel said to Joseph, are not your brothers feeding the flock in Shechem? Come, I will send you to them. Now, this also begs the question, how in tune was Israel or Jacob to his sons and their hatred for the youngest son? How smart is it to send the one that you know is hated out to find out what's going on with the one that's now the favorite?
Without an armed escort.
Why wasn't he with them to begin with, too?
Well, yeah, why isn't Joseph with them to begin with? That which begs the question. So then what happens? He says, Verse 14, and he said to him, please go and see if it is well with your brothers and well with the flocks, and bring back word to me. So he sent out from the valley of Hebron and went to Shechem. Now, what was we'll come to this evil report. What do you think was because it goes back to verse 30. We kind of get this in verse 2. What do you think may have been the evil report that Joseph was bringing back with regards to the brothers? That's foreshadowed in verse 3. What do you think? When he went back to his dad, what do you think he was? Yeah.
He told him.
He reported they were eating the sheep.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. He reports that they're basically, these sheep belong to the father. They're supposed to be tending these sheep. So he reports that, Dad, every now and then these guys take one of these sheep and they kill them. By the way, we know that they do this because they're going to do it in order to feed their father.
Yeah. They're not opposed to it.
They're not supposed to.
They're not opposed to it either.
Yeah. So they're taking and killing a sheep and having some food beyond what Israel is sending them, or what they've taken with them. Now, look what happens. So it says, I'm going to go back. We'll read all this. Now, when they saw him from afar off, I want to go to verse, I'll go back to verse 15. This is important. Now, here's one of those places in the text. I suspicion when we get to the world to come, that when we sit down, the Holy One, blessed be, he's going to say, by the way, that was me. I want to show you places where I showed up. Okay? And I think maybe this is one of them. I can't prove it, but it's fascinating that you have this man who is out in the middle of nowhere. It says, now a certain man found him, and there he was, wandering in the field. And the man asked him, what are you seeking? So he said, I'm seeking my brothers. Please tell me where they are feeding their flocks. And the man said, they have departed from here, for I heard them say, let us go to Dothan. So Joseph went after his brothers down to Dothan. So this is unidentified man who just happens to know where his brothers are, and just happened to hear where they're going, and is able to connect all this up and direct Joseph to find them, which
Happens to be really funny.
just right in the middle of this narrative. Yeah.
Yeah, that third time it says the man, and he's talking about, I heard them, and this is a broad open field. This is not at Denny's or at Sherry's having a cup of coffee and over here in conversation.
Yeah. How do you get close enough to hear
That's
him?
what cued me in. I went, oh, this guy is
Yeah.
something more than just a man.
Yeah, you gotta. It wasn't like they were most likely in proximity to each other enough to hear where they're going.
Yeah.
But he happens to. So I think this is one of those places. I suspicion it's one of those places where the Holy One is going to say, every now and then I just kind of veiled myself and I was there and was able to direct people where they needed to go. This is one of those places. I was the man. I was able to I knew exactly where they were, who they were, and was able to direct Joseph right to them. Yeah.
If Joseph would have gone back home and said, okay, Dad, I couldn't find them, then the rest of the scenario would not have finished out.
Correct. Yeah. So Joseph is lost. He doesn't know where the brothers are. He's looking for them in where he thinks they are. This man happens to appear and say, oh yeah, I heard them say they're going to go to this area. Anybody that's been down in the Negev knows it's a large area.
Huge.
So it's massively huge. So to try to find somebody, if you don't know where they are,
Just happened to stumble upon
is
his
a very difficult thing.
This also points to a lot of divine intervention. It's because he has his dreams. He goes to the field, and if it's Yeshua or the angel of the Lord, whatever, is saying, you need to get to Egypt. I'm going to get you there. And he points him towards his destiny of being
Right.
hoodwinked. And then
Like
it's just
Bill says,
God
he just
basically
goes home.
plans it out.
Okay, if he goes home, we just shut this off and we can all go home.
Going next door. Yeah.
So verse 18, the brothers. Now when they saw him afar off, even before he came near them, they conspired against him to kill him. Then they said to one another, look, this dreamer is coming. Come therefore, let us now kill him and cast him into some pit. Now, if you've been to Israel, those of you who have been there, you know that they have these cisterns, and you have very, very narrow entrance into these cisterns, and they're usually elevated above the ground. Okay, and then it goes down into the ground, sometimes 20 to 30 feet, and then it widens out at the bottom, the whole water. And then you plaster the bottom of this. But the only way you can get in and out of these, if you're going to go down there as a person, is if you have somebody lower you down with a rope and pull you back up with a rope. I've seen these kind of cisterns, and so I know what we're talking. I know what we're dealing with here. You don't want animals to be able to sit into these. So one of the things you do is you put a large rock on the top. Okay, put a large rock on the top. It's enough above ground where they can't get to it, and it keeps things from falling into it. It's narrow. It's narrow at the top, and then it widens out at the bottom. Have all this reservoir of water at the bottom. When you drop somebody down in there, they're not going to get out unless they're able to be pulled out by a rope. So this is the plan. We'll throw him in this. The initial plan is we'll throw him in here, and he'll just rot in there and he'll eventually die there. Okay. So look what happens. And then they said, we shall see what shall become of his dreams. But Reuben heard it, and he delivered him out of their hands and said, let us not kill him. And Reuben said to them, shed no blood, but cast him into this pit, which is in the wilderness, and do not lay hands on him, that he might deliver him out of their hands and bring him back to his father. Okay, that's Reuben's plan. But Reuben doesn't share that with any of the others. Verse 23, so it came to pass when Joseph had come to his brothers, that they stripped Joseph of his tunic, the tunic of colors that was set on him, that they took him and cast him into a pit, and the pit was empty. There was no water in it. This one had dried up. Okay, maybe there was a crack in the cistern, which is why people had stopped putting water in it, possibly. Bottom line is there's no water in this thing. So he's not going to last very long in there. And they sat down to eat a meal. Okay, so these guys sit down to eat a meal. They put Joseph in there. We find out later on in the narrative that Joseph is crying out to them this whole time. That's gapped for us now, but it comes out a little later. Then they lifted their eyes and looked, and there was a company of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead with their camels, bearing spices, balm, and myrrh, on their way down to Egypt. So Judah said to his brothers, what profit is there if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come and let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh. Okay. Now, Rabbi Foreman makes an interesting observation here. I find it fascinating. It says this, and his brothers, then the Midianite traders passed by. So the brothers pulled Joseph up and lifted him out of the pit and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver, and they took Joseph to Egypt. But here's what's interesting. You'll notice that there's Midianites and Ishmaelites. Now we can make a case that these two are genetically connected with each other. But the way that this text reads is this. It almost reads like you can read it this way. Then the Midianite readers pass by. They add the word brothers there in the text that's not there. And so here's what happens. It looks like the brothers see Ishmaelite traders come. What they don't see getting closer to the pit is the Midianite traders. The Midianite traders, it looks like, you could read the text this way, the Midianite traders pull him out and they sell Joseph to the Ishmaelites. That the brothers were not involved in the sale. You could read it that way in the text. Go back and look at Rabbi Foreman's stuff on this. It's fascinating because if you read the verse 28 does not say brothers. It does not have the word brothers in it. They put that in italics so that the pronoun of who they is that sold him is ambiguous. So look at this, verse 29. Then Reuben returned to the pit, and indeed Joseph was not in the pit. And he tore his clothes, and he turned to his brothers and said, now look at this. He said, the lad is no more, and where shall I go? Now, that phrase right there, the lad is no more, we're going to hear a few other times in the Genesis narratives, but we've already heard it one other place. You might know where we've heard it before, that someone is no more. Jesus.
I was thinking, but
No, it would be in Genesis. Sorry. Somebody is no more. Enoch. Okay, that's Enoch. Oh, okay, Enoch. Yes. Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. It never says in Genesis 5 that Enoch, this idea of he was not, does not necessarily mean he died. It just means When we say someone is no more, as you're reading it in Genesis, it means this. They have disappeared and we don't know their whereabouts. Okay? So we just don't know where they are. They've disappeared. They're MIA. So Enoch walked with God, and we don't know what happened to him. He was no more. And later on we're going to hear this phrase, he was no more, but it doesn't say he died. Joseph isn't dead. He's no more. He's missing, we don't know where he's gone. Now look what happens. So the brothers took Joseph's tunic, killed a kid of the goats, and dipped the tunic in the blood. Now, this is where we heard this before. Deja vu all over again. This is what Rabbi Foreman calls goats and coats. If you go back in our narrative, you'll remember that Jacob was deceived by Isaac was deceived by Jacob with a goat and a coat. Okay, so now it's going to come full circle. We're going to hear this again. Okay.
It seems that every time this happens, and it happens in pairs, the second time is always worse than the first.
Yeah, it's what we call, in Hebrew scripture, there's a term for this, it's called measure for measure. Whenever you do something to someone, whether it be good or whether it be evil, it comes back to you. It recycles. The good recycles back. The evil also recycles back. Measure for measure. And so what happens is Jacob had deceived his father, Isaac, using a goat and a coat. Now his own children are going to deceive him with a goat and a coat.
Like Abraham, he says that it's not his wife or whatever, and it doesn't. Isaac
says the same thing,
but he does it twice.
Does it twice. Yeah. So look what happens. It says they come back to, now watch what happens. Here's one of the connections with chapter 38. It says, then they sent the tunic, and they brought it to their father and said, we have found this. Do you know whether it is your son's tunic or not? And he recognized it. That's the word, recognize. Important word. Do you recognize this? And he recognized and said, it is my son's tunic. A wild beast has devoured him. Without doubt, Joseph is torn in pieces. Then Jacob tore his clothes, put sackcloth on his waist, and mourned for his son many days. I'll just say this. We have, I think in our culture, this tearing of the clothes, and those of you that have been to a Jewish memorial service, you'll note that they rip the sleeves off of a person as a way of showing that they are in mourning. Okay, the last one I went to, the sleeves are pre-cut, and then that way the two people can come from each side, and they just take the arms and they just rip the sleeves off. And it's a way of saying there's a break. Okay, so you tear your clothes as a way of saying we're breaking with the past. Okay, and then you put dust on your head because dust is a symbol of death. Okay, you sit in sackcloth and ashes, so we're seeing him grieve. And one of the things I would argue is we as a culture have lost the concept of grieving and how to grieve and allowing each other to freely grieve. And that grief is a process that takes a lot of time and that it's played out over the rest of your life. You never stop grieving. And neither should you feel bad that grief comes in waves. In America, we're like, get over it, move on. It's time to move on.
I was told that after my dad died at my place of work that I had grieved for, it was 3 months, and my boss, my principal said, you grieved long enough. And I was like,
yeah.
Really?
This is the mentality in America, is that a couple of weeks, get over it, move on. So Jacob here tore his clothes, put sackcloth on his waist, and mourned for his son many days. Now, think about this. All these brothers watched their father mourn, knowing full well that what they've done. Okay. And it says this, all his sons and all his daughters arose to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted and said, for I shall go down into the grave to my son in mourning. Thus his father wept for him. Now the Midianites had sold him, that is Joseph, into Egypt to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh and captain of the guard. Now, chapter 38 is this interlude, and we leave off from Joseph, and all of a sudden in chapter 38 we go into Judah. Okay, now we leave Joseph behind. You think, well, chapter 37, Joseph. Then we get to chapter 39, Joseph again, all the way to the end. Although, in the Joseph narratives that we're going to look at, Judah becomes the one who reconciles the family. And by the end of the book of Genesis, we're going to find out that it's Judah that the messianic line will come through. Okay? So let's look what happens in chapter 38. It came to pass at that time that Judah departed from his brothers and visited a certain Adulamite whose name was Hira. And Judah saw there a daughter of a certain Canaanite whose name was Shua, and he married her and went into her. So he's marrying a Canaanite. Well, anybody hearing that?
That's not a good thing.
Knows that this is not a good thing. The one thing you know if you're an Israelite
You don't marry.
is that marrying Canaanites is bad news. Never marry a Canaanite. Canaanites are what? They're idolaters.
Yeah.
They're going to lead your heart away from God. It's not because God is being racist. He's simply saying that it's outside your faith. I've been accused in the past of being racist because if you look in the Hebrew scriptures, it says to the Hebrew people, don't marry outside of the race. And it's not because he hates the races, it's simply because these other races serve other gods. So you're going to have syncretism and a mixture that's not good if you marry outside of your faith. They're going to ask you to serve their God, you're going to try to get them to serve your God, and it's just a mess. And then, how will we raise the kids? Are we going to raise the kids Canaanite? Are we going to raise the kids Israelite? You know, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, or Baal? Where are we going to go? How's this going to work? So, the person, this is patently obvious, I would think, but the person you marry sets the trajectory for the whole of your life. Because they're either pulling with you or pushing against you. So when you see this, you go, this is really bad news. It's not good that here is this son who is going to marry a Canaanite, and now it's what happens. So she conceived and bore a son. We don't even know her name. I mentioned that in the notes. We don't even know her name. It says she conceived and bore a son. We called his name and by the way, look how quick the narrative moves here. She's having babies. These aren't twins. She conceived and bore a son and called his name Odin. And she conceived yet again and bore a son and called his name Shelah. So it was just like 3 sons right in a row. And there's a little negative thing that's said about that we have here of Judah. It says he was at Kazib when she bore him. So it's kind of this little side note to say he wasn't around when she was having the 3rd child. Okay. Then Judah took a wife for his firstborn. Her name was Tamar. Okay. But Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord killed him. There you go. So we can say here is one of those clear places where the narrative steps in to say, this is what God thought about this individual. And God has, as we like to say, a smite button. That's the old King James. The old King James said, and God smote him. God has a button, and in this instance, he pushes the button, and dies.
That's one of the reasons that they were not going to have anything to do with the Canaanites. While they were in Egypt, God said that the timing that they were there, the iniquity of the Canaanites had not come to their fullness yet.
Correct.
So when they went into the land, they were to destroy them all.
Yes. So things are not looking up here, and then look what happens. Now we have, I need to stop there. We have what's called later on in the Hebrew scriptures, it's going to describe what's called Yabum. Yabum is where a brother marries his brother's widow and raises up a child, the first male child, takes over the inheritance of the deceased brother. Okay. So now Judah says to his next-born, Onan, he says, I want you to raise up a child for your brother with Tamar. And Judah said, Onan, go into your brother's wife and marry her and raise up an heir to your brother. But Onan knew that the heir would not be his. And it came to pass when he went into his brother's wife, he admitted on the ground, lest he should give an heir to his brother. He's willing to have relations with Tamar, but he's not willing to have a child with Tamar. Because he knows he actually gets as the next born son, he gets the inheritance that would have been hers. So he says, well, I'll have relations with her, but I don't want to give her a child. No children here, because then that messes up my inheritance. I get 2/3 now. So I'm now the firstborn, or next in line. But he's willing to use Tamar. And it says, and this thing was evil. Look what it says here. And the thing which he did displeased the Lord. Therefore he killed him also. Smote. Twice God hits the smite button on this family. Notice they lose 2. Notice that. That's interesting. They're going to lose 2. They're going to get 2 back. But they're going to lose 2. Okay? God hits the smite button. And now Judah has a choice. Does he give his 3rd son to this woman, who has now, in his eyes, killed 2 of his sons? From his perspective, 2 of them. And he's like, I'm not giving her the 3rd one. This woman is not good.
But she's smart.
It's all her fault.
But she's smart.
And so he doesn't give Shelah to Tamar. So Tamar says, okay, I got to take things into my own hands.
Yep. She's smart.
Here's what she does. Then Judah said to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, remain a widow in your father's house till my son Shelah is grown, for he said, and he thought, lest he also die like his brothers. And Tamar went and dwelt in her father's house. Now in the process of time, the daughter of Shua, Judah's wife, died, and Judah was comforted and went to his sheep shears in Timnah, and his friend Hira the Adulamite. And it was told Tamar, saying, look, your father-in-law is going up to Timnah to shear sheep. So she took off her widow's garments, covered herself with a veil, and wrapped herself, and set in an open place, which is on the way to Timnah. For she saw that Shelah was grown, and she was not given to him as a wife. When Judah saw her, he thought she was now here's what's interesting. He thinks that she's a zonah. That's the Hebrew word used, zonah, which means prostitute. We're going to see another word used in just a moment that's a little more fanciful. We'll get to that in just a second. So it says, verse 15, when Judah saw her, he thought she was a harlot. He doesn't even recognize his own, she's veiled, he doesn't recognize his own daughter-in-law. By the way, could this be any more sordid? No. He says, then he turned to her, by the way, and said, now look at this, that's how he's talked to her. Look at this. Please let me come into you. Okay? For he did not know that she was his daughter-in-law. So she said, what will you give me that you may come to me? Come into me. He said, I will send a young goat from the flock. We're back to goats. Goats and goats. She said, well, will you give me a pledge till you send it? He said, what pledge shall I give you? She said, your signet and cord and your staff that is in your hand. That was pretty much like saying, I want your wallet.
Yeah.
Just give me your wallet. Your driver's license and your credit cards. That would be good enough. So he arose. So this says this. Then he gave them to her and went into her, and she conceived by him. So she arose and went away and laid aside her veil, put on the garments of her widowhood. Everything was about clothing, goats and coats. Then it says, Judah sent the young goat by the hand of his friend the Adulamite. He doesn't come, he sends it with his friend. Now the friend says this, I'm looking for a kedoshim. I'm looking for a temple prostitute. Not looking for just a zonah. A zonah was one who would just stay in the streets, and that was your run-of-the-mill woman of the street. He says, I'm looking for a kedoshim, which is a temple. See, this is where we go back to the Canaanites. And this is what made the Canaanites so messed up. Was that you could come to the Canaanite temple, have relations with a temple prostitute, and this was considered worshiping God. Right? So you understand how insidious and how diabolical this is. if you were to say to people, come to church and have relations with women, and it's all part of the worship service.
There'd be a lot more people at church.
There'd be a lot more guys at church, put it that way, if you did that. Yeah, which is not a good thing, for all the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
So he uses the word kedashim. We're looking for this temple prostitute. So this is like an act of worship. And they say, well, we haven't seen any kedashim here. So he goes back. Now she still has his signet cord, his ring, and his staff.
She has evidence.
She has evidence. Right? Okay. That's not good. So then, verse 22. So he returned to Judah and said, I cannot find her. Also the men of the place said there was no harlot in that place. Then Judah said, let her take them for herself, lest we be shamed, for I sent this young goat, and you have not found her. Verse 24, and it came to pass about 3 months after that, Judah was told, saying, Tamar, your daughter-in-law, has played the harlot. Furthermore, she is with child by harlotry. So Judah said, bring her out and let her be burnt. I assume here that he means stoned and then burned, post-mortem, which is a way of saying in Hebrew mindset, if you are burned, it's a way of saying you have no place in the afterlife. You're gone. We're just going to do as much to get rid of you as possible. Verse 25, when she was brought up, she said to her father-in-law, saying, by the man to whom these belong, I am with child. Uh-oh. I got evidence. Now, the way she handles this, though, she doesn't publicly shame him. She could have. But she sends to him privately and says, hey, look, I got some stuff here. It belongs to the guy that I got pregnant by. And then she says, please determine whose these are. The signet, the cord, the staff. He's like getting his wallet back now. He's like, I recognize this stuff, of course. So Judah acknowledged him and said, she has been more righteous than I, because I did not give her to Shilach my son. And he never knew her again. Now it came to pass, which is biblical no, now it came to pass at that time for giving birth, behold, twins were in her womb. Remember, he lost two at the beginning, lost two children at the beginning. And so it was when she was giving birth that the one put out his hand, and the midwife took a scarlet thread and bound it on his hand, saying, this one came out first, sticks his hand out. Okay. So the midwife ties a scarlet thread around the hand. But then, and the word peretz, now the second child, he breaches and moves and comes out first. Then it happened as he drew back his hand that his brother came out unexpectedly, and he said, how did you break through? This breach be upon you. Therefore his name was called Peretz. After his brother came out, who had the scarlet thread in his hand, his name was called Zerah. And so the messianic line is going to come through Peretz, the one who breaches. And it's going to be interesting because later on, one of the messianic titles that's going to be used in the prophets is the one who breaches. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. But it's interesting that we have a foreshadowing of this messianic title in this narrative, that there is the one who stuck his hand out first, pulls the hand back, and then the second child breaches, and his name Peretz, which means the one who breaches, the one who comes out.
Well, it's funny that he's also a twin, right?
Yes.
So, and he's the one, he grabs the heel of his brother, right? I mean, wasn't that Jacob?
Jacob.
Yes.
Yes.
And this is also another fight in the womb, basically.
Yes. Prenatal struggles that are foreshadowings of things to come.
Right.
And Peretz breaks through, and it's through this. So now we have this narrative here as a way of saying to us, you thought it was going to be Joseph, but before you think it's going to be Joseph, pump the brakes, and all of a sudden we have this chapter 38. And there's these connections between chapter 38 and all that's come before it. Goats and goats, recognize this. Do you recognize this? And the two places where we have somebody recognizing something is in the first narrative, we have Jacob who's asked by his sons, do you recognize this coat that's dipped in goat's blood? And then we have Tamar who was promised a goat, and she says to her father-in-law, do you recognize these things? Same word. And he recognizes them. Goats and goats, yes.
I was just curious if tomorrow, I know that she had some issues with her marriages. And then he promises her the next boy that he has, which is gonna grow up. So she's basically waiting a ton of years. Was she obligated to wait for that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, she's obligated to wait. So she can't remarry. She has to remarry within the family.
Okay.
I also find it funny that he calls her more righteous than him.
Which is actually it's actually a legal term in some instances. In other words, she was in other words, he should have been concerned with the family line.
Yeah.
And she actually was. And here's one of those instances where we see actually, and this happens numerous times in the biblical text, where we see women having to do the right thing because the men aren't. Clearly.
Has that changed?
No, it's not changed.
Easy.
In 2,000 years, that's not changed that much. Very, in fact, it's minimal. But all the way through Scripture, we see women having to be innovative and creative in order for things to move in the right direction. Because the guys are not doing the right thing. Yeah.
But does the ends justify the means? I mean, she was deceptive. Yeah. Sneaky and deceptive. So how does that equal out to be doing the
Yeah,
right thing?
and that's, so, it does, okay, so the question is, does the end justify the means? On one level, no. On the other level, here's the really bizarre thing. For whatever we think of all of this, God chooses to use these people with all of their frailties and their foibles and their nonsense. I mean, we have seen, as we've gone through Genesis, absolute nonsense with regards to family. Husbands passing off their wives as daughters, or sisters. By the time we got to Genesis 19, we had Lot having relations with his daughters. Here we have a daughter-in-law and a father-in-law. I mean, we've said before, if I were to give you one word that describes, humanly speaking, what we have in Genesis, right under the word Genesis in the heading of I'd put dysfunctional families.
I'd put as the world turns.
You know, it's like a bad soap opera.
Yeah.
I mean, a really bad soap opera. So, what it shows, though, is that the sovereignty of God to use very, very flawed people, incredibly flawed people. We've said it before, if God had to use perfect people, there'd be nobody for him to work with. Because every family is dysfunctional to some level. It may be a 2, it may be a 10. Somewhere in this spectrum there's dysfunctionality. It's just a matter of degree. You and I are seeing right now how much, and I said it last week, this doesn't require being a prophet or the son of a prophet. We know that on the horizon, in the coming months and throughout this next year, we are going to see more and more Hollywood, TV, sports, all different genres, all of the dirt is starting to come out. People are being outed for all of the different nonsense. And what that shows you is that the dysfunction, there's always a level of dysfunction, just sometimes people know about it, sometimes they don't. Sometimes it's public, sometimes it isn't, but what I'm saying is, we've just seen the tip of the iceberg. We've only seen the tip of the iceberg.
God used Jacob's lust to something that he should have done in the first place, which was marry somebody who was, not a Canaanite.
Well, and there's a number of problems. I mean, what is he doing having relations with
A temple prostitute?
a temple prostitute? Let's say for the sake of argument, what does that say about him?
Yeah, that he is perfect and that he has lust and he went after those things.
Right.
you know, so he wasn't, I mean, he's one of the
And he
fathers
grew up with
of-
signet ring and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, look at how messed up, look at how this desire is. It's like, look, I'll give you whatever you want, here, just take everything.
Yeah, like his brother sold him all his like birthright and everything for a bowl of soup. He sold his
Right,
himself basically.
for passion.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, sometimes the appetites are different areas, but the bottom line is, you know, he's willing to give up
Everything for his lust.
for that lust.
Yeah.
You know, and so it shows you, you know, so does the end justify the means? Absolutely not. God would have loved it if his people would have said, you know what, we're going to do everything by the book the right way.
At least he apparently waited until his wife died.
Yeah, he did wait till his wife had died, but that gives him no excuse for a prostitute. So, you know, now he's like, well, I have a wife, okay, I'll go out and pay for it. And you get, how messed up is that? You know, and so instead of getting remarried, he has relations with a prostitute, and then he gets her pregnant.
Yeah.
And then you have to, then when he hears that she's pregnant, he says, well,
Stoner.
he's like, all right, stone her and burn her.
Yeah.
I will teach her.
Yeah. They come to find out it's me.
And then he finds out that the stuff is his. And like, oh, I was the one that got her pregnant? So now, I mean, this is so, like I said, this is so sordid and so messed up. But it shows you how in the middle of all of this mess, the beauty is this: in the middle of the mess, God is working out his plan.
And Judah apparently repented.
And Judah does repent. That's the key to this whole thing, is that by the time we get to later on in the Joseph narratives, we're going to see Judah become the one who rises to lead the family. And it's Judah who convinces his father to let him go down back to Egypt to get food, and it's Judah who finally speaks to Joseph and breaks through. All right, go ahead.
I was just thinking that Tamar is really, I think she was brave, and I think she knew her father-in-law. I think
Absolutely.
she said, okay, I'll get his attention, because I mean, she was so patient to wait, and she'd been through a lot. And so she risked a whole lot to get his attention, and I mean, I'm just thinking how brave she was to do that.
Right.
Because he didn't have to cop to it, he could have just said, you know, I don't know, I didn't give that to you, you must have stolen it or something, you know?
Right.
I mean,
Yeah, I mean, Jacob has to do the right thing. I mean, Judah has to do the right thing here too, and admit that this is, and he does. He says, she was more righteous than I am. All right, Dan.
Page 95 for the Aleinu. Aleinu l'shabbat le'no hakol, la'lekel la'le'oseh reshit, shelo asanu kegoye ha'matzot, ve'lo sarmanu kemishpakot ha'adamah, shelo sam shalkenu ka'em, ve'gol aleinu kekol ha'monah, ve'anaknu korim, u'mishtakavim u'morim, Livnei melech malkei ha'malim, ha'kadosh baruch hu, be'yom ha'hu, yihye Adonai echad, u'shemo echad. We are duty bound to praise the Master of all, to ascribe greatness to the one who created from the beginning. And he did not make us as the nations of the lands. He did not place us as the families of the earth.
Since we did not assign our portions as theirs, or our lot like all the masses, we therefore bow and worship and give thanks before the King of Kings, the Holy One. Blessed is He. On that day, Adonai will be one, and His name one. On page 97, top of the page, the Mourner Scottish, if you're not observing on the yard set memorial, you may be seated. Top of page 97. Yit Gadol v'Yit Kadesh, Shemei Rabach, V'Almiyah, V'Larach, Kirateya. V'Yamlik Makateya, V'Mekayon, U'V'Mekayon, U'V'Kaye, V'Kol Beit Yisrael, V'Agala, U'V'Zman Karim, V'Imru, Amen. Yehei Shemei Rabach, V'Larach, V'Olam, U'La'ameh, Almiyah. Yitbarak, Vayishtabak, Vayitpa'ar, Vayitramam, Vayitnaseh, Vayithadar, Vayithale, Vayithalel. Shemei Nekudashah, Moriku. Le'aleh min kol birkata v'shirata, tishbatekata, v'nemetekata, v'amara, v'almiyah, v'imru. Amen. Yehesh l'mei rabah, v'shemaya v'chayim tovim, Aleina ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru. Amen. Oseh shalom emrama, Uyaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru, v'imru, amen. Oseh shalom emrama, Uyaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru, v'imru, amen. Yahaseh shalom, Yahaseh shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, Yahaseh shalom, Yahaseh shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael. Yahaseh shalom, Yahaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yahaseh shalom, Yahaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Oseh shalom b'brama, Uyaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. V'imru, v'imru, amen. Heavenly Father, we ask that you comfort those who mourn. We pray, Lord, that you will bring them comfort. And Lord, we do acknowledge that you are the one who gives life and you are the one who takes life. And we submit to your sovereignty, but ask for your comfort. For it's in the name of Yeshua, Messiah, we pray. Amen. Please stand for the Aaronic benediction. Following the Aaronic benediction, please join us downstairs for a moment. Yevrechecha, Yehovah, v'yishmerecha, Yaeh, Yehovah, panav elecha, v'chunecha, Yisah Yehovah, panav elecha, v'yasem lecha, shalom.
May Yehovah bless you and safeguard you. May Yehovah shine his face unto you and be gracious to you. May Yehovah lift up his face unto you and give to you peace. Amen.
Nice.